Hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I'm Catherine, and surprise, here is a second episode in one day because we had a pretty big announcement yesterday that I haven't gotten around to yet, and we need to talk about it. So we will be back to our regularly scheduled programming of the F101 Spring Break Sprint tomorrow with episode 11, but today we have to talk about what happened with Red Bull and with Max Verstappen's race engineer, because just announced he is going to be leaving Red Bull in a year and a half. Right. Yeah, this is a big deal, obviously. And I mean, this is a big deal in general because GP, Gianpiero Lambiase, is one of the best race engineers on the grid, right up there with Bono, who is Kimi Antonelli's race engineer over at Mercedes, and Will Joseph, who helped will Lando Norris to the championship last year over at McLaren. So they just announced that he will be leaving Red Bull after the 2027 season, which is the end of his current contract with Red Bull. So he got stolen away, but he didn't get stolen away early is the thing. But the thing about this is now we are going to be hearing about this pretty much every single day from now until December 2027, when he officially has his last race with Red Bull, just like how we had to hear about Lewis Hamilton moving to Ferrari when he announced that in 2024, at the very beginning of 2024 for the 2025 season. So this is going to be insufferable. Now, let's go back and talk a little bit of context of who GP really is. Obviously, if you are relatively new to the sport, you know GP as the guy who is talking to Max Verstappen on the radio in the car during races. And he has actually been in Formula One since 2008. So let's backtrack, talk a little bit about where he came from, where he got to now, and why we think he might be moving to McLaren. So he did not get his start the same time Max Verstappen got his start in Formula One. He actually got his start at Jordan in 2008. Jordan is the team that turned into Midland, which turned into Spiker, which turned into Force India, which turned into Racing Point, which turned into Aston Martin. Yeah, the genealogy of that team is kind of ridiculous. We have an entire episode all about the F1 team genealogy, and the one linked above is the one that talks specifically about how Aston Martin became the Aston Martin that we know today. So in 2008, he was a performance engineer for Giancarlo Fisichella, who I just released the episode about Crashgate in the Crashgate race, the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix, where Giancarlo Fisichella was still driving in F1, and came to discover that apparently on radio, other race engineers would refer to him as Fizzy, which I did not know and found that interesting. But I did not put that in the episode, which is also linked above, and you can watch all about how Flavio Briatore got banned from Formula One for life, and he is, once again, back here. So GP ended up staying in the revolving door of different team names of the team that is now known as Aston Martin, but I think was still Force India by the time he left. He eventually ended up as Sergio Perez's race engineer in 2014. Fun fact, Sergio Perez, of course, now was at Red Bull, now at Cadillac, but he was Sergio Perez's engineer for one season and then moved over to Red Bull in 2015 to become Daniel Kvyat's race engineer. And if you don't know the little history, backstory, lore, Daniel Kvyat was a Red Bull driver who got demoted to Toro Rosso and was replaced by the one and only Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen ended up taking Daniel Kvyat's seat, his race engineer, and also his girlfriend, which is just that's funny to me. And so GP has been Max Verstappen's race engineer since 2015. He was also promoted to the head of race engineering in 2022 and then the head of racing at Red Bull in 2024 after Jonathan Wheatley left to take the Audi/Sauber gig that he has since left. But that is how GP got to basically being the third ranking figure within the technical hierarchy at Red Bull. So he's like the number 3 man on the totem pole behind like the sporting director and Laurent Mekies at the very top as CEO and team principal. So he is kind of in the same way that Jonathan Wheatley had to leave Red Bull in order to get a team principal gig. GP's kind of maxed out at his current position. There's no there's no upper movement left for him to do at Red Bull anymore, which is where we have this move to McLaren. And this is like, it sounds surprising because of how closely GP and Max Verstappen have worked together over the years, but in the grand scheme of Formula One, it's not really that surprising to have a team rise to the top and then have all of the top personnel from that team eventually get stolen by other teams. Like this is a very typical Formula One cycle, and a very unsurprising cycle that we're seeing all of these top guys at Red Bull moving to other teams. They've moved, Adrian Newey is at Aston Martin right now. GP was actually in negotiations with Aston Martin for a while, and then those fizzled away for reasons. I don't know why. Who could possibly? So this is not entirely surprising. And the move to McLaren, he has been announced as their chief racing officer, reporting directly to team principal Andrea Stella. So he's moving up one rung in the hierarchy. Obviously, when it comes to McLaren, we know that Zach Brown is the boss of McLaren as a whole team, but Andrea Stella is the guy that's in charge of the McLaren racing side of things. So he is now he's going to be the number 2 at McLaren Racing, pretty much. And it's been speculated in some of the articles that we've seen that he's eventually going to take over as team principal from Stella, but apparently that is inaccurate, so we don't really know. And one of the other things about Andrea Stella, he is an engineering team principal, so he got his background in the engineering side. It's kind of what Aston Martin tried to do with Adrian Newey until they realized that Adrian Newey was best served just focusing on building them the car, considering everything that's going on at Aston Martin right now. So Andrea Stella, as an engineer and team principal, is kind of looking to unload some of the responsibilities that is going to be put onto GP's plate. GP is not going to be working as a race engineer. They currently have 2 race engineers right now. They have Will Joseph, like I said, he's Lando Norris's race engineer, and Tom Stallard is Oscar Piastri. So they're set on 2 pretty solid race engineers at the moment. So they don't need another one to come in. And if it weren't for the fact that Max Verstappen only wants to race with GP as his race engineer, or soon to be only wanted, he probably would not be a race engineer any longer if this was any other team, any other driver, any other type of situation. So that's where he will be leaving behind the race engineer responsibilities and moving towards a slightly different role when he goes over to McLaren. Now, why are we announcing this now? It is April of 2026. GP's contract does not end until December of 2027. Well, honestly, it's probably just to screw with Red Bull. Because like I said at the beginning of this episode, anytime we are going to hear about GP's name, it is going to be attached to GP is leaving Red Bull for McLaren. And we are going to hear that every single time something goes wrong with one of Max's drives. And obviously the Red Bull in the first 3 races of the season hasn't been the top car on the grid. And obviously Red Bull struggled last year until they decided to sacrifice a little bit of 2026 engineering in order to help the 2025 car, which ultimately did work. But every time something went wrong with Max's car last year, or Max had a bad drive last year, they talked about Max's exit clauses. And Max does have exit clauses in his contract. They all do. And as a reminder, Max's contract with Red Bull ends in 2028, which, if you don't know that Max's contract with Red Bull ends in 2028, I don't know what rock you're living under, but I really kind of want to go there because I'm really tired of hearing about Max and his exit clauses and his contract ending in 2028. Max, we all know that Max is in flux, so to speak, with what he's going to be doing now that Red Bull is not the most dominant team on the grid. Max has 4 world championships. He's not going for 8. He's not going for the record to break Lewis or Michael Schumacher's record. Lewis is still obviously also trying to break Michael Schumacher's record, and he's trying to do it in a Ferrari, which may or may not work, probably won't, but we never know. But this, and Max has said that he would not drive in F1 without GP, who would be leaving him a year ahead of the end of Max's contract. And now Max said that in 2021, and things can change in 5 years. And Max could be, and we know that Max is ready to be done with Formula One. And Max can wake up tomorrow and say, yes, he has his exit clauses, but the exit clauses really only come into the factor of if he wants to move to another team in Formula One. Max really wants to do endurance racing. Obviously, we have the endurance racing that he has done so far this season, the stuff that he's going to be continuing to do all season long. He loves sim racing more than anyone I've ever seen. So Max, his future is unsurprisingly looking less and less likely that it's going to be in Formula One. And, but this is just gamesmanship from McLaren because McLaren likes to do that. Like Zach Brown probably found out about this and started laughing his ass off and said, "Oh, this is going to be great, that we're going to be insufferable for now into the next 2 years." Now we have to live with this, and we have to live with David Croft and the F1 TV broadcast and the Sky broadcast reminding everyone that GP is going to be leaving Max in a season and a half. This is the longest farewell tour of all time, and it's going to be exhausting. Now, will Max go to McLaren? The answer is he could, because right now Oscar Piastri's contract is allegedly through 2028, just like Max's is at Red Bull. But Lando's contract is only through 2027 right now. And I don't see McLaren letting go of these two drivers. Now, obviously, Oscar can leave. Oscar might really want to leave for, I don't know, reasons of favoritism towards his co-driver. I don't know why we would think that, but Oscar might want to leave before the end of 2028. Lando, like, and if McLaren is going to choose like which driver they have to keep if they want to replace a driver with Max Verstappen, we know it's going to be Lando. Like, I would be shocked if they pick Oscar over Lando. But it's like when Lewis moved to Ferrari, they had to pick between Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, and we have discussed the clear reasons why it was Charles over Carlos that we all don't necessarily agree with, but Carlos is doing fine at Williams. It's okay. So he could go to McLaren. Will he? Probably not. If Max does leave Red Bull before the end of his contract and stays on the grid due to a exit clause situation, which I am so tired of the words exit and clause in that same order, then he would probably end up going and hanging out with his buddy Toto at Mercedes. Do I think it's likely? No. But do I think it is slightly more likely than Max going to McLaren? Yes. Honestly, I think that Max and GP both might just leave Red Bull at the end of 2027, and I'm going to have to find myself a new favorite driver. It will probably just be Isaac Hadjar. But I do think that especially if Max is not happy with the regulations by the time we get to the end of 2027, he's going to say peace out, which also the Verstappen camp was not surprised. I saw a quote from Jos Verstappen out there earlier today where Jos said that they knew that this was coming, which obviously, like, I really didn't expect that GP was going to do this entirely behind Max's back. But like Max has to make his own career decisions, so does GP. And so does, GP is in his mid 40s at this point. He's got a family. He's got some other things that he's going to want to do and to tick off his list of things to do in motorsport and eventually actually get a team principal gig. So we'll see. But my final thoughts on this are, is it unfortunate for Red Bull that they are losing another one of their senior leadership members? Yeah. Like I said, is this a completely and totally cyclical situation that we see in every major Formula One team that is successful in the history of the sport? Also, yes. So it happens. I'm going to be real annoyed that we're going to have to listen to talk about this from now until December 2027, which is exhausting because it's April of 2026. We have more than a year and a half to go where we're going to be hearing about this. It was enough when we had to deal with the Lewis is going to Ferrari next year stuff 2 years ago in 2024. So now we're going to have to deal with this, which thanks Zach Brown. Really happy for this. They're really thrilled. But anyway, it happens. Obviously, it's going to be sad to see the band breaking up, but I do think that once GP is no longer Max's race engineer, Max is not going to be long for Formula One. Whether that means he's going to skip 2028 and just end things in 2027 and do endurance racing full time, we don't know. But that's probably what's going to happen. And I would be shocked to see him finish out all the way through 2028. Like I said, Max has 4 world championships. If he gets a 5th, that's going to be cool for him, but it's not it's not the end of the world if Max ends up being a 4-time world champion and going off to dominate in other series, because we know that he's dominating in other series that are giving him other different challenges at the moment. So we'll see. Anyway, coming up next, our spring break sprint continues. Like I said, we will have episode 11 out tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a video all season long in the Red Flag Rundown series, in our regular episodes of reacting to the races and making our race predictions, which are always really bad, the spring break sprint series, and any other episodes that we come up here on the Going Off Track podcast. So make sure you like and subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform so I can continue to inflict my motorsport opinions upon the greater population. that's been this emergency episode about GP leaving Red Bull and going to McLaren in 19, 20 months from now. And this is the only thing that we're going to be talking about, other than the regulations that nobody likes, which hopefully will be fixed by the time we get to Miami. But this has been an emergency episode of the Going Off Track podcast, and I will see you in the next one.